Oh. Okay. All right, I'm going to try and keep this close, the microphone close by so you can hear me. My voice is a little bit shot. Okay.
Yes, when you're that close, it sounds good.
Okay. Now I'm going to show you the slideshow, and then we can get started. Share my screen. So that others will be able to hear better. And of course, if you have a question, you can unmute yourself. All right, now. And now let's share my screen. And then we'll have both of these running at once. Okay, hopefully this is going to work. Now you guys can see this, and they can see that. And they say, Shalom al Yisrael. Everybody's happy. This is not really working. Okay, so we are at lesson 2. All right, those of you who are online, I hope you can see that screen. The only downside is that whoever's in the room can't see what everyone online is doing. I don't know, that's part of the entertainment, right? I'm just kidding. All right. We're at lesson 2. The joy of purpose, facing stress with patience, mindfulness, and hope. Something that we just dealt with here. Sometimes you need a little bit of patience to work through things that can be a little frustrating. And hopefully this was helpful. So these are things that are frustrating in life. Hassles, annoyances, things can impede on our happiness. Developing patience could be a problem. Now, we established last week, and we're going to continue on with that notion that when you have a mission-oriented mindset, that things can be a lot different. Human beings are naturally happy. A child is born happy. And even when a child gets angry, 5 minutes later, they're right back in the game. They bounce back very quickly. The problem is that as we get older, things start getting in our way, and we lose that sense of happiness that we once had because of things. Now, they're not necessarily big things. If you take a look at text 1, it's not the large things that send the man to the madhouse. No, it's the continuing series of small tragedies that send the man to the madhouse. Not the death of his love, but a shoelace that snaps with no time left. The dread of life is that swarm of trivialities that can kill quicker than cancer, and which are always there. License plates or taxes, or expired driver's license, or hiring or firing, or doing it or having it done to you, or roaches or flies, or broken hook on a screen, or out of gas or too much gas, the sink stocked up, the landlord's drunk, and so on and so forth. These are the things that could really get in the way in life. And it's these things that we're going to address today. Now, there are issues with tragedies, major tragedies, and we're going to get to that in a later lesson. But today we're going to talk about the small things that could really frustrate someone and in many ways could really get in the way of everything that's going on in their life. We've all heard the saying, don't sweat the small stuff, which implies that stress is about big events, divorce, death of a loved one, serious illness, bankruptcy. How many times do I speak to someone and they tell me, sorry, Rabbi, I'm busy. I need to go to the doctor today. Or, sorry, Rabbi, I'm busy, but I need to take my car to get an oil change. Those are things that constitute busy here, which maybe they are. Depends on the person. For some people, the statement may have effect in different ways. Is there anyone that needs a book, by the way? We now have an extra book. You didn't get a book yet?
No, I was just saying hi.
Oh, I thought you were holding up your hand for a book. Is it easier to see without them? I actually have a spotlight for my Zoom videos I could use, but I think they could see me, so it's fine. We actually have quite a few videos today, so it might be helpful. So research suggests that minor hassles, such as things that are just basic pressure in work, things that just get in the way, things that could get us frustrated, toilet being stuffed, or things of that nature could really get in people's way. Now, one reason may be that when you're faced with a major life event, so people tend to muster up all of their coping skills for those things. If a major tragedy happens, people really try to work on themselves to overcome the issues that they're facing. But when it's the small things, it could really bother someone and could get in the way. So we're going to discuss a few antidotes to the stresses that come from these things. And the first thing is an old word, which is very much misused. And it's a word called patience. Patience is usually used as a way of waiting or delaying gratification. But the truth is that patience actually has a different meaning. And it's a way of dealing with stress and anxieties and issues that get in the way. You see in text number 2, do good things come to those who wait, patience interventions to improve well-being. Patience defined as the propensity to wait calmly in the face of frustration, adversity, or suffering is a character strength just beginning to receive substantial psychological inquiry. Initial evidence supports that interventions intending to increase patience also lead to increased well-being. Though people tend to think of the outward manifestation of patience, calm and tolerant behavior, it also has an inward emotional aspect, serene inner states. In fact, the inner component may be the defining feature of the virtue. Patience is not equivalent to delay of gratification, because delay of gratification involves the choice of whether or not to wait for rewards. In contrast, patience does not always involve a choice of whether or not to wait. The only real choice a person may make is deciding how to wait. It may be helpful to conceptualize patience as a character strength, where instead of seeking to change the situation, people exert control by changing themselves to fit the situation. Thus, patient people are not being passive, but are actively adapting to face their circumstances. So a patient person is not someone who's waiting for things to pass, but patient people are ones who are dealing with a situation instead of passively letting it go by. And this is the idea of patience. But now we're going to look at the Jewish concept of patience. Just want to take your patience for a moment. Just want to make sure that my channel is running on YouTube. For those of you who don't know, these classes, yes, okay. These classes are recorded on YouTube, and you could listen to them afterwards if you missed anything. That was very nice. Let me lift this up so they could hear me. Here, Al, I'm going to lift this up so I'm closer to the microphone. Is that better? All right, good. Human reactions are mostly, okay, so here you see pictures of people dealing with this. We're going to get to traffic in a minute. It's about how we frame a particular stimulus. The frame is grounded in the belief that life's beliefs is not about what happens in life, but it's about how we deal with what happens in life. We can get annoyed. The happenings of the world are meaningless and left to a chance. If we feel that whatever is happening to us is only, as we said, a happenstance, just something that happens to be, then this would hold true with everything that goes on in our life. However, the truth is that the Jewish approach taught to us by the holy Baal Shem Tov is that everything in life is not just by chance, but everything that happens is very, very significant and important. And not only that, but everything that happens in life is part of God's master plan and purpose, which is a fascinating concept. And until he came and brought this concept, the Baal Shem Tov, in the late 1600s, it was unheard of, this idea, to the extent that the previous Rebbe was once walking with his father, Rabbi Shalom Dover, and he pulled a little leaf off the tree. And he said to him, "How can you pull the leaf off the tree? That leaf has a purpose." Every time a leaf flies off a tree, the Baal Shem Tov explained, it's there for a purpose. Yes, the wind blew it, and yes, the atmosphere caused the wind to blow it, but ultimately it was God causing the atmosphere to cause the wind to blow that leaf. Why? Maybe there's a little ant on the ground that's praying to God and saying, "God, it's too hot for me. Can you please blow a leaf so I'll be cool?" We don't know everything, but everything is part of a greater scheme. Let's take a look at text number 3. I would have people read, especially with my current voice situation, but the people on Zoom wouldn't be able to hear it then. We should clearly recognize that our travels to different places are not random, God forbid, but specifically directed by God. God's intention is that a particular person has a specific portion to rectify in a particular place, whether through Torah study or prayer, or through eating, drinking, and sleeping for the sake of heaven, or through another means of serving God. As the Baal Shem Tov, a righteous memory, explained the verse, God establishes the steps of man, meaning God imparts the desire to a person to travel to a specific place. God's intention being that the person should engage in a particular divine service, thereby rectifying what this person must rectify. Therefore, when we come to a particular place, we must take this to heart and ask ourselves, why am I here? For what purpose did God bring me here? It is certainly not for naught. As I always tell people, we think that we come here because there's better golf courses, but really, we come here because God has a plan of why each and every one of us could be here. You say, well, I wanted to retire. Well, you could have retired in Arizona, you could have retired in Texas, you could have retired in Miami Beach, but for some reason you decided to retire here. It's because there is a purpose, especially if you move from another place to here. So when we think about it, talking about patience, God directs a person to the exact location necessary for the fulfillment of his or her mission. think about it for a moment. When we're stuck in traffic, why are we so frustrated? Because we tell ourselves, I need to be somewhere else. Someone is expecting me, or I'm expected to be in a certain place. We have an agenda, we have expectations for ourselves. And when we don't follow what we expect our life to be, then we get frustrated. Because this is how it should be, the way I expect it. But if you think of yourself that you were put here in the first place, not to do as you have set up for yourself, but that you are created for a purpose and a reason to be where you are at that time, then you realize that every place where you end up is for a reason. Could be to do an act of kindness, maybe to learn something, maybe to do something sacred. So when you miss that flight and you end up in an airport somewhere, then there's really more to it. There's a woman, Mrs. Chana Sharfstein. She related that in February 1979, there was a Chabad Women Convention in Detroit, Michigan. In February, you could imagine what it's like to fly out of Michigan. Well, as you can imagine, there was a blizzard, a big snowstorm, and they ended up missing their flight, obviously, and they ended up staying where they were for Shabbos, although they had planned to go back to New York for Shabbos. But she wrote up a detailed description to to the Rebbe about what she had, what had happened, and she said that we were stuck in Michigan because of a snowstorm. And so he underlined the word, crossed out the word stuck, and said that you're never stuck anywhere. You're never stuck in a place. You have a reason to be there. Why are you there? In the end, when they got that message, they ended up going to university. There's a lot more to the story, and they ended up handing out Shabbos candle kits to some of the girls at the university, and one of the girls ended up coming back to her faith. It's a long story, but you're never stuck in a place. You're there. You're put there for a reason. And if we see things like this, then life suddenly doesn't have the frustrations to it. We're going to watch a short video. I've got to play this in both at the same time. No. Okay, this is not playing the videos on here. 1 second.
Rabbi Hillel of Parich was a master teacher of Hasidus and Jewish mysticism. When Rabbi Hillel traveled, his student Rabbi Shalom Homener would accompany him. One evening, they stopped at an inn, and Rabbi Shalom began to pray the evening service. As part of the prayers, Hasidim often meditate deeply on the nature of God, as well as undertake profound soul searching. Rabbi Shalom spent so long meditating and praying that by the time he completed, later that day, the innkeeper came to pray the afternoon prayers. Saw that Rabbi Shalom was still.
Rabbi Hillel of Parich was a master teacher of Hasidus and Jewish mysticism. When Reb Hillel traveled, his student Reb Shalom Homener would accompany him. One evening, they stopped at an inn, and Reb Shalom began to pray the evening service. As part of the prayers, Hasidim often meditate deeply on the nature of God, as well as undertake profound soul searching. Reb Shalom spent so long meditating and praying that by the time he completed, the sun had risen. So, Reb Shalom began the morning service. Later that day, the innkeeper came to pray the afternoon prayers and saw that Reb Shalom was still in the middle of the morning service. The innkeeper, who was a simple villager, exclaimed, "What is it with this Jew? Yesterday he spent the whole night in prayer, and now he has prayed the whole day." I'm different. I can just say Shema Yisrael and be done with it. Obviously, this man is a simpleton. Reb Shalom had completed his prayers and overheard this remark. His mentor, Reb Hillel, later commented, "The words of the simple villager had more impact on Reb Shalom in terms of self-improvement than 3 years of me teaching him the deepest secrets of Jewish mysticism." Rabbi Gershon Dov of Pahar was a chassid of the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Shalom Dovber of Lubavitch. One of the highlights in the life of a chassid is when he meets privately with his Rebbe to discuss his spiritual life and receive direction for improvement. After much preparation and soul-searching, Reb Gershon came to the town of Lubavitch for his long-anticipated private audience with the Rebbe. As he waited in the antechamber of the audience room,
Zoom is still playing.
Reb Gershon stood, lost in thought, near the place where the Rebbe's family hung their overcoats. Mendel, the attendant, saw him lurking in the corner and, not knowing Reb Gershon, was suspicious that he intended to steal something. Mendel grabbed Reb Gershon and led him forcibly to the exit door. Instead of explaining himself to the attendant, Reb Gershon wept and exclaimed, "I've been driven out of the Rebbe's antechamber. Evidently, I'm not ready for my private audience."
Okay, so as we see from here, two similar stories of Hasidim. Now you say, well, those are Hasidim back in Russia, and they could obviously handle something like this. But the truth is that the contrary is obvious, because they actually were very high in their godly service, and they should have, as would be right in both of those cases, they were actually right in what happened to them, meaning in the case, in the first story, he was actually really working on himself, and he should not have been belittled. And in the second case, he actually belonged there, and he should not have been sent out. But in both of those cases, they saw this as a message to themselves. And how much more so in our current situations, when we have things that happen to us that maybe we expect them to be different, but they really shouldn't be that way. And so we have to be so when a person is faced with annoying circumstances, it is for a purpose. Now, it's not about accepting the situation, meaning that they're accepting the fact that they're being accused. And we're not talking about being bullied around. That's not the point here. But it's about seeing that circumstance as a lesson for themselves to be able to learn from. Like, I was once doing a fundraiser, and I had emailed an individual, to participate in the fundraiser. And he wrote back to me, "Rabbi, I didn't hear from you a whole year. Why are you just coming to me now?" And I was inside I was upset, because, this is someone that I felt that, we had tried to help him, whatever. We had tried to do things for him, and he seemed to be very ungrateful. And then I spoke to a friend of mine, and he said, "Well, maybe it's something that you have to be more diligent about, And I thought about it for a moment. And so it's not about accepting abuse or tolerating abuse from others. It's about how we are reacting within ourselves. Okay. And obviously, if someone is in an abuseful relationship or something, then we're not saying that you have to just accept it. But when you see something in the way that everything is purpose driven, then you are able to deal with it in a much easier way. So you could think that this was a unique approach to life that these Hasidim had, but the truth is that every one of us is a shliach for God. It's a messenger from God, each one in our own way. And sometimes, on the contrary, the fact that someone is not that spiritually inclined, maybe their moment may have a much greater impact than someone that is. You know, if someone says, if I may try to tell something to someone, then they'll say, "Oh, well, you're a rabbi." You know, they won't respect it that much as maybe if it comes from a fellow businessman or just someone in their club that may tell them something. You know, I think you should be going to synagogue more often. Maybe that will have a greater impact than if the rabbi. Okay, of course the rabbi. You know, he needs more congregants, so of course he's looking for that. Rabbi Mendel Futterfass was imprisoned in the 1950s in Russia and this former Soviet Union, which back then, if you studied Torah or you opened up yeshivas or you had mikvahs or you had a synagogue, these were considered federal crimes at the time. And so he was imprisoned, and he always liked to say there were others who were imprisoned there as well, whoever were considered counter-revolutionaries. So there were doctors, lawyers, there were scientists there, anyone who the Soviet Union didn't respect or didn't like. And so they said to him, "Why are you always happy?" And he says, "Well, why are you always sad?" And they say, well, one says, "Well, I was a doctor and now I can't practice medicine anymore." Another one says, "Well, I was a lawyer and I can't live on my life's dreams." Another one says, "I was a scientist working on a great project and it couldn't come to fruition." And he says, "Well, to me, all I am is someone that's serving God every day. And if I'm serving God outside the prison, I'm serving him in the prison. I'm doing the same thing." So when we see it in that way, but at the same time, we have to remember also that we can't just let society do anything to us. But as Rebbe once told his chassid, you speak about what you need, but you have to think about what you are needed for. We have to make sure to be active in finding our moment and trying to see what we can do to make better our situation in our time. And to be clear, I know some people may be nervous. This is not an all or nothing proposition. This is something that's a life journey that we're constantly working on every day. And sometimes we do better at it, sometimes not. It's not two extremes. It's not that either you are self-oriented or you're a mission-oriented person. It's something that we have to constantly work on. And sometimes, you may be stuck in the airport and you say, well, I just got to relax. And sometimes it may be, well, let me see what I can do. It's not a all or nothing proposition. So this is a little exercise. Think about a recent hassle and what did I need out of life at that moment and what is needed of me at that moment, right? Think about these two questions and keep them in your drawer. One is, what do I need out of life at that moment? And the other one is, what am I needed for at that moment? They sound very similar, but they're very opposite. Okay, what do I need out of life at that moment? And what was I needed for at that moment? And if you keep asking yourself this question, the question of what do I want, what do I need, that will always bring frustration. But when you ask the question, what am I needed for, then automatically the frustrations will dissolve. Just another quick short clip. Let me first get it on here. Why is this not playing? Oh, I missed that one. Okay, meanwhile, I'll play it on here. Oh, there we go. Nope, not that.
Caught up with a group of people who had no problem dealing with the backup and the snow. She joins us live with their story. Amy?
Okay, David, I've been covering weather stories for 20 years now, and never have I seen what we are about to show you. I-80, big accident. People are at a standstill. And then we see this. A group of men from Michigan stranded with the rest of these drivers. Are they complaining? No, they're dancing in the middle of I-80. While most of us would complain about being stuck, they just turned up the radio and celebrated. A half hour into an 8-mile backup, and these guys didn't care. With nowhere to go, they danced. Are you having fun down there? Okay, we do not know how long those great moods lasted. We hooked up with those guys at about 1:30. We were told by state police that I-80 cleared up about 4:30, so they were out there for a good 3-4 hours. They just turned up the radio and celebrated. A half hour into an 8-mile backup, and these guys didn't care. With nowhere to go, they danced. Okay, we do not know how long those great moods lasted. We hooked up with those guys at about 1:30. We were told by state police that I-80 cleared up about 4:30, so they were out there for a good 3.
Okay. So that's just a little cute clip. Get back to this. Okay. So we're done with this point. So that's point number 1. Okay. You guys on Zoom, you good there? Okay, good.
Yes.
They like the clip. All right. Any questions before we move on? No? Okay. No questions either means everyone gets it or no one gets it. So, all right. How happy are you right now? Exercise 3A. Now think of things that you need to do tomorrow. Try and include everything. And then, how happy are you now? Think of things that you need to do tomorrow. And how happy are you now? So this is the second aspect of things that get in our life, get in the way. So the first one are things that just are annoyances, that are small issues that face us, our canceled flights, our getting in traffic, our stuffed toilets, whatever it is. But then you have things that are simply overwhelming. You get overwhelmed. We're too busy, too much going on, and everybody has a lot going on in their life, whether they like it or not. And this is a different kind of stress. It's about having too much on our plates. You have dealing with your houses, with your oil change, with your portfolio, with your jury duty, with the kids, with the construction, with the whatever it's going on in your life, with the doctor's appointments, and with the clubs and with the golfing, and there's a lot going on. So you could get very overwhelmed. You get very stressed from everything that's happening. In the Jewish works, there's a term for this. It's called Pizur HaNefesh. Pizur HaNefesh means dispersion of the mind. So the next part out of 3, there's 3 parts to today's lesson. The next part is, how do we deal with this issue? Overstressed because of being too busy, minding your busyness. Today, they want to do something called multitasking, high stress and frustration. And so we're going to deal with this in what we call in Jewish text being a panimi. A panimi is a person who engages in endeavors fully and who is completely involved in what has to be done at that moment. Things not pertinent to the matter at hand are considered non-existent. And in such, you will have calmer and lower stress levels. People think it's cool to multitask. It's not. It's unproductive in most cases. Actually focusing on what you have to do one thing at a time is actually more productive. And we're going to look at this from Jewish stories and Jewish perspectives. The first one happened in 1970. There were Hasidim who came to celebrate the 10th of Shvat, which we just celebrated last week, which is the yahrzeit of the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, and the day that the Rebbe accepted the leadership a year later. On that day, there was always a very large Farbrengen. Farbrengen is a Hasidic gathering, and tens of thousands of people came to celebrate it because it's a special year. It was celebrating 30 years, commemorating 30 years. And a lot of Hasidim came from Israel. Now, for those of you who ever took a flight from JFK to Israel, you will know that a lot of times you can get a midnight flight. So if the Farbrengen started early evening, so they figured that they could go and they could catch their flight that would be leaving at midnight, 1 a.m. or something like that. And they were at this gathering, and the Rebbe was at the head of the table, was at the head of the room, and he sees that those going to Israel started looking at their watches, and they started getting nervous with the time. So he said like this, he said, "I see that you're getting very nervous with your flight and you're very worried about the flight." He said, "I want to tell you what happened in 1920 when I entered the room of the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, who I'm named after, and he was traveling to Leningrad. He was living in Leningrad, and then he was traveling to Moscow. Now you have to understand what it meant for a rabbi with a long white beard to travel to Moscow in those days. If he got caught, he could have been immediately imprisoned, which eventually he was imprisoned. Jews weren't allowed to just roam the streets. He was going on a specific mission that had many dangers associated with it to get rid of a decree against the Jewish people. And it was a very daring mission. And it was considered, as I said, counter-revolutionary activities. They were being surveilled. Everything that happens, every place that he went, that he did, he was being surveilled. The train was getting ready to leave from Leningrad to Moscow. And this is a story that the Rebbe is saying, that I went into my father-in-law, who was his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe at the time, and he was calmly sitting and studying at his desk. And I said, I was flabbergasted. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. He's about to take a daring mission that he literally could be arrested for going on this mission. And he's sitting and studying calmly as if nothing is going on. And I said to him, don't you realize that the train is leaving in a few minutes? And he said, yes, I know. And I know how dangerous it is. But let me tell you a story. And he told him the following, text number 5. He said, there's a concept called success in time. What does this mean? We cannot add actual time to the length of the day or night, but within the unalterable constraints of time, we can make the fullest use of it and utilize it to the maximum. In order to do so, we need to adapt the habit that when engaged in a particular activity, nothing else exists. Anything that is not pertinent to the matter now at hand, whether it's something that we have previously done or that we need to do later, should be considered as if it does not exist. All we have to do at the present moment, because this moment, brief as it is, will be free of all irrelevant thoughts and matters about the past or future, and will have the ability to fully utilize this moment. This is success in time. And he went on to tell him about a great sage known as the Rashba, who was a scholar. He would answer questions. He was a rabbi. He was a doctor. And with everything going on in his life, he had time to take a walk every day. And this was his secret, focusing on the moment. You know, we live in an era where there is immersive attention that is very much needed to everything that happens in our lives. This is very unfortunate. 4 out of 5 teens sleep with their phones next to them. And the Boston Children's Hospital reported that the hospitalization was coming in due to sleep exhaustion, that these kids were not getting enough sleep, because in the middle of the night, there would be a text they would have to wake up to see. Maybe their friended them on Facebook. It's not Facebook anymore. What's it nowadays? Instagram, whatever they're up to. TikTok. So today, even more than ever, there are so many distractions. Okay? And we know, even as adults, we know that this affects us in the same way as well. When we sit down to do something, the first thing we do is we put our cell phone right next to us and we wait. Maybe we'll get a text, maybe we'll get an email, or I'm in the middle of a conversation with someone. Let me see, maybe they'll write back to me. It's actually a Chabad rabbi that just came up with some sort of app, and I don't know all the details of this, but it was actually invented by a Chabad rabbi, that you could put your cell phone on a urgent mode, which means that it's going to be off unless there's something very, very urgent. So I guess, your wife may have a number to get through to you on your phone in that mode. I don't know exactly how it works, but something like that some people know if they have to get through to you, if it's very urgent, they can get through to you. Otherwise, your phone will be off in the middle of a meeting or something like that. I'll have to find out more about it. But mindfulness is good for our happiness. We're talking about happiness. Mindfulness is good for that. But you wonder, why is this something that we talk about? This doesn't sound like a very Jewish concept. It sounds like a very secular concept. Something that most time management should be talking about. Is this really a Jewish concept? And the answer is yes, it is, because it touches on our theme. What is our theme? It's a theme of purpose. When our purpose lies in something specific at that moment, at that time, in that place, our hearts and minds have to be geared to what's happening there. If we are thinking about something else, then we are not focused in the right thing. Everything we do, no matter how secondary or trivial, has to be out of the way for that moment. If it's something that we are expected to accomplish at that time, then that's what we have to do. Practically, how do you become more mindful? We live in a world of distractions like never before, which also means that we live in a world that we have a much greater ability to do things quicker and faster than ever before. What may have once upon a time been getting out a message through a mail or through a fax, today we could simply type a message, email, get it out of the way, and move on to the next thing. That's number one. If we focus on what has to be done, what once upon a time was spending minutes or hours on something, sometimes now could be spending seconds on something and moving on to the next project. But in general, we have to focus on meditation. Now, I know when you think about meditation, you think about some Eastern religions, but it's actually originally a Jewish concept, borrowed from there, as most of their ideas come from Judaism. Discussion for another time. A lot of those Eastern religions come from Abraham. But anyway, what is the idea? The idea is that we're emptying ourselves from anything that is filling up our mind and overpowering whatever's going on in our life. We have to meditate for a moment. Take something, think about it. Think about something meaningful. Think about a Torah thought. Think about a godly thought. Meditate for 2 minutes. Think about something that we learned in a lesson here. And think about it and say, how can I relate that to my life? Today, people can't focus on one thing for more than, what is it today, like 10 seconds or something like that, what the mind could focus on. When other thoughts get in the way from what we're trying to focus on, we have to remember the story of a disciple of one of the great sages, the Hasidic masters known as the Maggid of Mezrich. He advised someone to go consult with Reb Wolf of Zhitomir. He traveled to the town of Zhitomir and he came to the man's home and he knocked and knocked, no answer. Went around to the side door, no answer. He said, I know you're home. I see he saw the light through the window. He said, I know that you're home. No answer. He banged and banged, no answer. Finally, he opened the door and he let him in. He said, why didn't you let me in? He said, I am the master of my house and I could let in whoever I wanted to my house. And then he got the message that his Rebbe was trying to tell him. If you have issues with being distracted, you have to know you are the master of your home. It's up to you to allow in whatever you want to allow in. And so this is the lesson with regards to the second aspect of things that are getting in our way that could be distracting us from our happiness, is the idea that everything has to have its time and place, and we have to put it there in that way to focus on what we're doing at that moment. Okay, I don't see a lot of videos on Zoom, so I don't know if you're with me. Everyone with me here?
Yes.
Okay, I did get a yes. Was that Monica? Okay. All right, there's a lot of people on Zoom.
Yes, Rabbi, we're here.
Okay, very good. So now we're ready to go to number 3. Wait, I got a message here in my chat. Yes. Okay, very good. All right. We good? Ready to continue on? The final thing that could cause stress, anxiety, and therefore get in the way of our happiness is worries. There are some things that are worries, fears about the future, things that could really be issues. Again, we're not talking about, major events that happen in life, God forbid, losing someone or tragedy. We're going to talk about that another day. But you may have got a call from the IRS, or you may have got, maybe a friend said something really nasty to you, or maybe you're having difficulties with your mother or father, trying to deal with them. These are issues that have to be dealt with, and they could really be stressing you out. And rightfully so. They could be real issues. Again, they're not tragedies, but they're still issues that have to be dealt with. And they could really drag someone down and make it very difficult for them. So these are worries, fears about the future. Sometimes there could be maybe someone lost their job, or they're just having financial stress. So how do we deal with that? So of course, we talked about the idea of having faith, but a little bit more about what can we do about it. And for that, we're going to look at a verse in Proverbs that reads as follows. The verse in Proverbs says, Da'aga belev ish yashchena, which is translated as a worry in a person's heart, cast it away. Yashchena means cast it away. So the Talmud has a little play on words here because, okay, you have a worry in your heart. Not always could you just cast it away. It's very easy to say cast it away, but sometimes it's an issue and it has to be dealt with. So how are you dealing with it? So the Talmud gives us two opinions, which we see in text 6b. Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi interpreted this verse. One said, cast it away from the mind, and the other said, speak about it with others. Now, this is a little play on Hebrew, okay? But the word yashchena could either read with a shin or a sin, okay? Anybody know Hebrew? You know, this is the letter shin if the dot's on that side. This is the letter sin if the dot's on that side. So if you read it, yashchena means cast it away, which is a simple meaning of the verse. But the other way to say it, put the dot on the other side and you read yasichena, which means speak about it. So daga belev ish, if you have a trouble in your heart, yasichena, speak about it to others. So the second view is not disputing the first one. Some things could be cast away if we just realize that it's not such a big deal and get rid of it. And sometimes, just throw it away. But sometimes it is a bigger deal. So we speak about it with others. If we can ignore it, obviously. And when we speak about it, it should be done in a way of someone that's caring, that's mindful, that's understanding, and that is on the same page of who we are. And by doing so, that friend, you could gain a few things out of this. Number one, that friend could provide sound advice that may be helpful, maybe something you didn't know. Like recently we had here a little car accident. It was Baruch Hashem, everyone was okay. And, I called someone and I said, I want to, I called someone asking them about speaking to an attorney for a car accident, and, he talked to me and he said, listen, we explained the details of what happened. And he says, I don't know if you want to go that route. Maybe, and he explained to me that maybe in this case, it may not be worth it to make a claim. And it seems that he was right. He says, I don't think you want to talk to an attorney. So sometimes you can just get good advice from a friend. That's one thing. Alternatively, when you articulate an issue, that itself could provide some clarity. It becomes clear in your own mind about how to go about it, and sometimes it could help you understand what's the best way to do it. And finally, the bonding with another person itself, that itself mitigates the stress. Knowing that there's someone there listening and caring about your plight, maybe there's nothing they could do about it. But the fact that they know that they could connect with someone who could be a part of their issue, the other person should be other in body, but not in spirit. meaning someone that really is close in spirit. It's happened to me more than once that someone calls me up and says, Rabbi, I need to speak to you about something. And I say, okay. And they go on and they start talking about the whole thing, saying the whole issue that's on hand. And I ask questions, understand what's going on, get clarity of what's happening. And then they say, thank you, Rabbi, you helped me so much. So I didn't even do anything. He says, no, you don't know how much you just helped me. And sometimes that's all it is. Sometimes it's just a matter of being able to speak to someone about it could literally cast away all our issues. Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe, says as follows, text number 7. I'm responding, he wrote this to someone that obviously had worries. He wrote, I'm responding to your letter in which you write about your fears, though they are very much unwarranted. You have been granted the choice and authority to think, speak, and act according to what you consciously desire. Even if you experience the emotion of fear, you are able to remove your thought, speech, and action from the emotion. The essential things is not to think or speak about this fear at all. Immediately upon not thinking about it, the fear will automatically dissipate. At the very least, the fear will become dormant and will not be felt in your body. And over the course of a few days, it will be completely dissipate. To this point that if it will not come up in your mind at all. The reason for the removal of thoughts nullifies the fear is because all emotions are sustained by the mind. Through the medium of thought, therefore, by removing the thought, the mind is disconnected from the emotion and the emotion is no longer aroused. So what is he saying here? That sometimes it's just a matter of it's a matter of the way we're thinking about it. That itself is causing us. Just thinking about it in a worrisome way, that itself is the stress. And sometimes you speak about it and you realize, okay, maybe it's not anything really to be worried about. You know, sometimes I get an IRS letter and I call my accountant frantic. And he says, that's no big deal. Just send them this document and it's fine. That's all they're asking for is a document. They're not asking for money. Yeah.
This seems to completely go against what we just read about talk to somebody about your worrisome issue. And here, this rabbi is saying,
This is the castaway. This is the castaway.
yeah,
Right. So what we're trying to say is how they actually work hand in hand. Sometimes speaking about it could cast it away, and sometimes it's just about the way we think about it. So speaking to someone about it helps the way we think about it, and that itself gets rid of the issue. Is what we're saying.
isn't this rabbi saying, don't speak about it?
No,
Is that what he's saying right
no,
now? Speak about it.
He's saying to remove it from your mind, to not let your mind bother you.
The essential thing is not to think or speak about it.
About this fear at all. About the fear of it, right? The fear of the issue is that's bothering him, right? The actual thing is something that it is what it is. But it's the fear that's in the mind. The fear that's, for example, you have in text number 8, you see, our thoughts nurture the emotions, okay? So try to pose for yourself this task, not to think of a polar bear, and you'll see the cursed thing will come to mind every minute, right? You know, think about people who have fear at nighttime, right? You're afraid because in your mind, you're constantly thinking what's going to happen. And imagine if someone, I'll keep it simple, a child thinking, well, there's a monster in the closet, right? There's, of course, no monsters in the closet, but it's in the mind. The mind is bringing that fear. What he's telling him is, and this is why it's important to speak about it. That's the point that they go hand in hand. When we speak about it to others, you realize that there's not really a fear involved. He's telling him that the fear is in your mind. in many cases, the fear of it is in your mind. Sometimes it's something that has to be dealt with. Okay, so it has to be dealt with. But the fear, for example, how many people have fear making a tough phone call? I do, right? But okay, well, we're talking.
That's the circumstance.
Those are a lot of people would rather sit on hold than making a phone call to a family member or, but in many cases it's in the mind, and that person will pick up the phone and actually be very happy to speak to you. So it's the thought about it that's just building up. In many cases, it's not even existent, right? The more clear? You're still not with me on it.
No, because I definitely agree with that second one. And again, right there's a quote. It says, stop thinking and speaking about the worrisome thing.
Right. Okay.
So I tend to resonate with that.
Right.
That's me, because the more you give attention to a negative thought, the more that negative thought keeps growing and growing, whatever it is.
Right.
Even if there's nothing you can do about it at all, why worry about it? Worrying about it is just giving it more energy in your mind and causing you to feel bad.
Right. I'm just saying it doesn't necessarily negate the first part. Sometimes it has to be spoken to, sometimes it has to be removed, and sometimes by speaking about it could help you remove it. But the point is not to let it build up within yourself. Sometimes it has to be thrown away, it has to be cast away. That's why we say both translations. Sometimes you have to speak about it. Sometimes speaking about it will help you cast it away. But both are both are important. Yeah.
I used to do a lot of counseling. Wasn't that long ago. But one of the things that I always caution people about is turning into a kosher animal. Stop ruminating.
Okay.
You chew it and then you swallow it.
Don't.
And then you cough it back.
Don't chew your cut, right?
And every time you do it, it gets you.
Right. Yeah, like you said, but we tend to do that. So it depends on the situation. The answer is it depends on the situation. So sometimes, you got to speak about it. Once you speak about it, then you got to move on. Deal with it, speak about it, deal with it, move on. Sometimes you shouldn't speak about it at all. Sometimes it's completely in the person's mind and they just got to get rid of it. How do you do that? So it's not easy. So like we said, if I tell you don't think about a polar bear, you're all thinking about polar bears. So how do you do that? So the answer is text number 9.
Find something better.
Exactly.
Something that you do want.
Exactly. So that's text number 9. The primary method of removing negative thoughts from one's mind is by directing your mind towards other matters. This might be even worldly matters that if they are necessary and make you happy, or God's Torah, which delights the heart, by establishing fixed time for daily Torah study, particularly with a study partner. By the way, a lot of times when do people start thinking about things? When you get in your car and you're driving and it's a quiet road? Well, this is where a phone has a good purpose. You have many good Torah classes online. I mean, all over. You have Chabad.org. Aside for that, you could even go on Spotify and YouTube, and I mean, everywhere. You could find productive things to listen to instead of those things that are constantly bothering you that will just keep building up anger. And I should say, it's good to close the radio. Okay, there's a lot of things in radio that can get you very stressed. Just find things that are productive to listen to, and that's really, really helpful. And then the final point here, okay, is when we study, even moreover, is to learn with another person, to come to a class to study. And you see that there's other people that have worries too and are able to put those aside. Text 10, as long as we attempt suppression only, then the harder we try, the deeper we get ourselves into soup. When we attempt self-distraction and contrast, our efforts can get us somewhere. If we wish to suppress a thought, it is necessary to become absorbed in another thought. The distractor we seek should be something intrinsically interesting and engaging to us, or even if it is unpleasant, should not be boring or confusing. Okay? And now we want to take this in a bit of a positive route. And that is, how are we able to recast our worries and instead of it being worry, turn it into hope, turn it into something positive, turn it into something productive? Ultimately, both of these are varied options, and whatever works is fine. Whether it means to cast away, or whether it means to speak, or whether it means to find something else to focus on, these are both ways that will help us. But now we want to also take it to the next level. And for this, we have to explain the difference between belief and trust. When we say you have to believe in God, so belief could be something that's very far, that's very distant, but then there's trust. When I'm walking down the street, I'm holding my 5-year-old's hand. That 5-year-old has complete trust in me. Even if I may be petrified where I'm walking, like down a Brooklyn street. No, I'm just kidding. Some are. But still, that child has complete trust. Our trust in Hashem has to be in this way as well. Trust doesn't just mean to believe that God exists. Trust means, as we say in Chavas Halavavas, the duty of the heart. Sorry, I just got to do 2 of these at once. I'm just going to put all these on here and we'll go through them. What is trusting? You place your trust in someone who has compassion, pity, and love for you. You put your trust in someone that is generous and kind, even if we are undeserving. You put your trust in someone that knows what is best and beneficial for us. So I was getting a little cut off. Sorry about that. You put your trust. Trust is not forgetful about us or lazy about helping us. You want someone like that. You want someone that is strong and can't be prevented from helping us. You want someone that has complete and exclusive control over our destiny, and you have someone that has already taken care of us in the past. There's no one like that. And that's why when it comes to trust, we have to turn our trust to Hashem. He has all these things. He's truly trustworthy. He has these attributes. What does it say on the dollar bill? Does it say in God we believe, or does it say in God we trust? You know why? Because when it comes to money, then you have to have trust. As a famous sign says, in God we trust, all others pay cash. Trusting is something that is not easy. Does it mean that bad things won't ever happen? We're going to talk about that in a different lesson. In the context of Emunah, but to believe is to say that it's very distant and not relevant to my life. Trust means that whatever happens to us is good. We don't have reason to worry. To trust God because we are exclusively in His hands. He knows what is best for us, and we will get exactly that and only that. It might not be something that we could immediately perceive as good, but often it will become clearer as time goes on and we see how our life plays out piece by piece. Sometimes we may have to wait a time to figure that out. Sometimes we'll go an entire life and we won't understand it. But just like a 5-year-old doesn't understand if they're to walk into a room that there's a surgery going on, or where there's a scientist doing something. Sometimes there's higher ways of understanding things beyond our basic knowledge. As far as our knowledge is concerned, we don't understand everything. But if we believe that God has all these things, has compassion, pity, is generous and kind, knows what's best and beneficial for us, is not forgetful about us, is strong and can prevent from things happening, has complete and exclusive control over our destiny, and has already taken care of in the past, then you can have full trust in God. And when you do, you will be and feel much more reassured. It may take time to build real trust and belief in Hashem. Most things will work out. And when you have the trust, you'll eventually start seeing things work out in their way. If we see everything as a tragedy, then that's the way it will be. But if we see things with trust in Hashem, trust in God, that it's for our own good, then we'll begin seeing it for our own good. Text number 11. This is from Rabbi Bachya ben Pekuda, known as the Chovat HaLevavos. It's the introduction to Shar HaBitachon, the gate of trust. The benefits of trust in God include tranquility of the heart in the face of worldly worries. The one who has trust finds quiet, security, and serenity within this world. As it is written, blessed is the man who has trust in God. God will be his reassurance, from Jeremiah. And it says, he will be like a tree planted by water, sending out its roots to the brook. Now you say, yeah, well, of course the rabbi is going to say that. Well, there was actually a study done in 2010, 125 self-reported believing, but not necessarily religious, Jews who had elevated levels of stress. They took part in an interesting study. It was divided into 3 groups. 1 second. We'll get to that in a moment. It was divided into 3 groups. One group engaged every day for 2 weeks in progressive muscle relaxation, PMR, which helped sometimes to relieve their stress. A second group told to do nothing. They were called a waitlist condition. And the third engaged in spiritual integrated therapy, SIT, every day for 2 weeks. There was a psychologist, a Jewish guy, David Rosemarin, and he was head of this program. He consulted with rabbis to identify spiritual strategies for coping with stress and worry, and they focused on trust in God, using things like the text that we just used. They were created to be able to partake in their home. They had a daily program. It would begin that way. They would start off with stories of trust in God. When people trust in God, they would read the Chavas HaLevavos, which they just read. And finally, they were encouraged to pray to God every day. Then they had to self-report, and this is what came out. Text number 12. Participants in the SIT, Spiritual Integrated Treatment Group, reported significant reductions in stress, worry, depression, and intolerance to uncertainty. Symptom improvements was clinically significant. At pre-treatment, participants in the SIT group reported near clinical levels of stress and worry, and post-treatment 6 to 8 week follow-up reported levels in the normal range. The SIT group reported greater treatment gains compared to the WLC, waitlist condition, Surprisingly, PMR, progressive muscle relaxation, WLC participants did not differ in most outcomes. It's also interesting that Orthodox affiliation was not a predictor or treatment outcomes in the SIT group. SIT is likely not appropriate for all Jewish individuals. Nevertheless, the surprising finding suggests that interest in SIT among Jews extends beyond the Orthodox community. Okay, so these weren't Orthodox Jews. And so faith and trust in God, if it affects the recesses of our hearts, then we have to be able to dig within ourselves to bring about the trust and the faith within ourselves, and that will actually relieve a lot of stress. Because if we see everything for what it is, that it's just a purpose and another part of our life's purpose and mission, then this will allow us to mitigate that stress. We're going to conclude with a few things to develop your trust. Number one, think of someone you trust. Think of what makes them trustworthy. Think of them as God's messenger being sent to you to help you in your life. Think of their presence in your life as a gift from God, and try to feel that God loves you. Think of someone that you value very dearly in your life, family member, example, and think of a gift of God that they were given to you as a great love and care, and show appreciation for that. Think of a stressful time when things turned out better than expected, that at the time seemed really, really difficult and challenging, but now that you look back at it, you say, not only wasn't it so bad, but it actually worked out a lot better than I thought it did. And finally, try to feel trust in God the next time you do something, and it's as a basic life activity, and believe that God is there with you, helping you, and there with you at that moment. And always say some prayers. You have two sample prayers, Psalm number 23, Psalm number 121. God is my shepherd, I shall not want. He causes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even when I walk in the valley of darkness, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a feast before me in the presence of my adversaries. You anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord for the length of days. In Psalm number 121, these are good psalms to say. I want to remind you that you have additional readings. The Gate of Trust, which we just read a very small part of it. This is something that many of our sages had suggested people to read when they're feeling stressed or in difficult situations. So you have the translation of it. It's relatively short, from the Gate of Trust. You have it in your appendix. I encourage you to read that. And whenever you feel in a situation that you're under a lot of stress or difficulty, to read through the Gate of Trust. And it will be very helpful. Just going to play one more video with the key points, and then we'll open up to questions if anybody has.
Lesson 2. 1. For a life of joy, we need a mental framework that will help us deal with our daily stresses and annoyances.
That will help us deal with our daily stresses and annoyances.
The places we go are not random, but
2.
precisely directed by God.
The places we go are not random, but precisely directed by God toward a specific purpose. When we come to a particular place, we should ask ourselves, for what purpose did God bring me here? 3. We should be keen on finding purpose in everything we experience. We should learn to find growth even from annoying moments. Instead of processing them as stressful experiences, we can process them as something beneficial.
Sorry about that.
4. When life is about personal pursuits, it is difficult to identify the purpose in frustrating circumstances. The more mission-oriented we are, the more we are able to convert our hassles into opportunities for growth.
Yeah, exactly.
5. There is purpose in everything we do, no matter how secondary or trivial. When engaged in a particular activity, we need to vest our entire mind and heart into it, because at this moment, this endeavor constitutes the purpose of our existence. 6. The Talmud presents 2 approaches for dealing with worrisome thoughts. One approach is to discuss one's worries with another person. Another approach is to cast away worrisome thoughts. 7. Although human beings have the capacity to control their minds, it is often counterproductive to try to stop thinking of something. To cast away a thought, the mind must become absorbed in something else. 8. To trust in someone means to believe he or she will take good care of us. In God we trust helps us cultivate optimism about the future.
We need to invest our entire mind and heart into it, because at this moment, this endeavor constitutes the purpose of our existence. 6. The Talmud presents 2 approaches for dealing with worrisome thoughts. One approach is to discuss one's worries with another person.